Dropped objects preventing procedures in Qatar gas. Dropped object is defined as any object, with the potential to cause death, injury or equipment, environmental damage that falls from its previous static position under its own weight. When referring to dropped objects, consider hand tools being used at heights. Hand tools, equipment left behind after working at height, WAH. Small items such as bolts, wedges, welding rods and clamps not within suitable storage containers placed or forgotten at elevated work areas or placed into scaffold tubes. Operations conducted at height. Equipment mounted at a height that, following contact, vibration or environmental conditions, could fall, that is, piping, lights, cameras, rigging gear, etc. Temporary equipment at height, where personnel are working on a level directly below the work area. Lifting operations. Consequences of dropped objects. Dropped objects are one of the main causes of incidents during construction and commissioning activities. The consequences of a falling object include personal injury, death, structural damage, damage to equipment, release of hydrocarbons, fire. Strategy to prevent dropped objects. Prevention of dropped objects will be based on the hierarchy of controls as listed below. Elimination: eliminate dropped object potential. Substitution: substitute the need to take objects that might drop by performing activities on the ground. Engineering controls: provide engineering solutions such as debris netting, storage boxes, scaffold fans, lanyards, tethers, etc. Administrative controls: training, TBT, awareness campaigns, etc. PPE: provide suitable PPE to protect personnel against dropped objects. Create site-specific dropped objects work groups. Identify and assess problem areas. Develop and implement action plans, that is, high wind hazards, plans for preparation for changing weather conditions. Monitor results. Continually improve. Risk areas prone to dropped objects. Experience from lessons learned indicated that the following are the most common areas on a construction site, prone to dropped objects incidents. Not all inclusive. Areas below lifting operations. Scaffolding erection, dismantling. Elevated work areas or platform. Workspaces where equipment is mounted overhead. Temporary, portable equipment. Vessels, barges. Pipe racks, bolting, unbolting, grinding, flange installations, etc. Unsecured loads on forklift trucks. Poor stacking of materials. Loading and unloading of material from trucks. Accessing ladders with tools. Work near deep excavations where objects, stones can fall in. Causes of dropped objects. Inadequate application of the dropped object hierarchy of controls. Poor housekeeping. Scrap and debris left aloft. Lack of or poor inspection. No equipment maintenance. Poor designs. Weather. Poor planning. Load miscalculation or poor quality, inspection of lifting gear. Lack of risk assessment. Instability. Ineffective control of equipment or tools taken aloft. No tethered tools at height. Improperly secured or inappropriate loads. No regular inspection procedures. Becoming blind to changes in activity, dynamic risk assessment. Carrying equipment while at height. Unsafe manual hoisting equipment. Impact of dropped objects. Even a small object falling from a height can cause serious or fatal injuries. The potential harm to the individual has been determined using the dropped objects calculator. The dropped objects calculator was developed with a mathematical model based upon the mass of the object and the height from which it falls. The dropped object calculator will be used in determining the level of a potential near miss, that is, first aid, recordable injury, lost time, hypo or fatality. Dropped object prevention. Subcontractors and construction personnel will establish a dropped object work group specific to the site. The objectives of the dropped objects work group will be to complete a worksite dropped objects inventory using a hazard ID tool based on the dropped objects hierarchy of controls. Use the inventory to develop an inspection program. Introduce drop object mitigations into the project's work procedure as the project progresses from one phase to the next. Ensure project management provide toolkits, and ensure the workers use them when implement processes to account for tools. Raise overall dropped objects identification and mitigation awareness with the workforce. Train relevant personnel to identify and mitigate dropped objects processes. Secure tools from dropping to lower levels. Perform risk assessments and incorporate mitigations into existing JSA&T. Erect signage and physical barriers to restrict access before work is conducted overhead. Task a special group to roam the construction site to ensure adequate barriers are in place. All rigging risk assessments require consideration of the risks involved in moving equipment at height. It may be required to add checks for dropped objects in pre-lift checklists to ensure that all packing material and other loose objects have been removed. Review and revise JSAs for dropped objects potential. Introduce regular dropped objects campaigns. Schedule regular hazard hunts, identifying hand tools are tied off, no loose objects, no unprotected openings in grating. Openings around pipe spools penetrating gratings are closed, toe boards in place, regular housekeeping performed, and barricades are in place when needed, etc. Review handling and securing procedures for tubular components. Introduce area ownership, and hold personnel accountable. Add secondary retention, and use safety systems, such as safety nets. Ensure inspection of personal protective equipment, PPE, for example, safety harness and lanyards, mandating the use of chin straps at all times while tools are tethered. Inspect all overhead equipment and locations for loose items that may present a hazard following task completion.